All right, we are live on YouTube, 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time, Monday, March 30th. And a couple of new things going on. It's been an interesting start to 2020 for all of us. And certainly it's been an interesting start to 2020 for me. So I want to take a couple of minutes and look at how 2020 has started, how it's been destabilizing, and then get into what's going to happen going forward. How can we do sort of 2020 version 2.0, and certainly what I'm going to be doing for 2020 version 2.0. So as you know, we started with all of these YouTube live streams, and then I promptly got sick. Last Friday evening, a week ago Friday evening, I guess, I started just kind of feeling a little run down, and not surprising, nothing serious. Saturday, got up, did a little bit of work. By about noon, I was really feeling terrible. Coughed once and went, okay, gonna go ahead and self-quarantine. Went to the bedroom, got away from everybody. By Saturday evening, I was running an incredibly high fever, 102. Genuinely thought that I was dealing with COVID-19. By Sunday evening, I was dealing with an incredibly bad sore throat. Things sort of evolved over the next couple of days. Had a telemedicine visit with my doctor. We decided to treat it as bacterial. Got on an antibiotic. Immediately started getting better. And what's interesting is that we figured out how to treat bacterial infections in 1928, right? So Alexander Fleming discovers penicillin at St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1928, and immediately we see a revolution in how human health is handled, how acute disease is handled. What I find incredibly interesting is that in 1928 we figure out penicillin, we figure out antibiotics. It's 2020. We still haven't really figured out antivirals, right? Viruses are still sort of the wild, wild west. And the reason for that is that viruses just don't allow for easy treatment solutions. And that's one of the reasons why right now, with all of this COVID-19 stuff, we are dealing with this incredible destabilization, and it can confuse people. I'm not going to get into the biology of how viruses operate as opposed to viruses, or how viruses operate in contrast to bacteria. The important thing is that one of them is a very simple problem to solve. The other is an insanely complicated problem to solve. So that's just something that we need to be aware of. I am going to link to an article down in the description that, for those of you who are interested in the sort of the etiology of bacterial versus viral situations, how antivirals work a little bit. It's an interesting little article. A good biology textbook will give you all the keys that you need to understanding this stuff, right? So we recognize that this COVID-19 situation is a destabilizing situation, and that allows us both opportunities, and it can put us behind the curve. So we've talked a bit already about John Boyd and his OODA Loop, and the entire notion of the OODA Loop has at its core that when we are operating in very stable environments, when the sort of mass of our orientation, our belief systems, our previous experiences, and whatnot are centered, we operate very stably, right? It's just like in a squat. If you have your center of mass over your center of gravity, you are going to be incredibly stable. That's how we define balance, is your center of mass over your center of gravity. I'm sorry, over your base of support. Center of mass over base of support is what allows us to have balance. I apologize for misspeaking. So what happens when we induce instability into a system, that's what allows for motion, right? So if we think about throwing something, if we think about squatting, if we think about lifting something up, we need to shift the center of mass of an object away from its base of support in order to institute some motion, right? That applies more to inanimate objects than it applies to, say, something that we're using muscles for, but the analogy is roughly right? So, but what happens with destabilizing influences? Physically, we can talk about destabilizing influences if I move from being on 2 feet to on 1 foot, right? Now my base of support has gotten much smaller. My center of mass is generally unchanged in its size, in its density, but now what's happening is I have to adjust where that center of mass is to get it back over my base of support. Naturally, I will overcompensate in many cases and become unstable. I fall over, right? So that is the idea of instability being introduced into a system. And in the Boydian parlance and the fighter pilot lingo that Boyd preferred, he would talk about turning inside. And he got this idea from both observing and understanding the rate of turn that was happening in the skies over Korea. So on the left-hand side of the photo, we have the Soviet-built MiG-15 fighter. On the right side of the photo, we have the American-built F-86 Sabre. Excuse me. The MiG-15, by all accounts, could outperform the F-86 in a air-to-air combat role. And early on in the Korean conflict, we saw very comparable kill ratios in that the MiG-15 and the F-86 were near 1-to-1 in their kill ratios. However, the F-86 pilots discovered they had 2 distinct advantages. First was that the F-86 had this big bubble canopy that you can see. So the pilots were able to maintain an orientation, a visual observation and understanding of where they were in relation to the other plane, much better than the MiG pilot could with its very small forward focus canopy. The other thing was that the F-86 was able to effectively do something called turn inside. In a turning engagement, the F-86 could use its energy advantage to actually gain a position behind the MiG-15 pilot. So, Boyd's lingo of turning inside gives us this idea of what we can do when things are changing in a rapid, unstable, evolving environment, how we can adjust. We want to maintain this perspective of turning inside, maintaining an energy advantage, and adjusting to this evolving reality. When we are closed to the evolving reality, when, to use the OODA Loop lingo, we are not allowing the inputs from unfolding circumstances, outside information, and our unfolding interaction with the environment to shape our orientation as well as our decisions and actions, what happens is we fall behind the power curve, right? That terminology, the power curve, is directly related to the idea of energy maneuverability that Boyd studied, but it is something that I think we can all understand, right? I am becoming progressively more out of touch with what's happening. And if I maintain a very rigid, fixed orientation during times of dynamic change, I am going to see a greater distancing of my ability to react to the environment in a timely and effective way. I am falling further and further behind in my decisions, and I'm further and further out of touch, right? So in day-to-day life, what do we do to turn inside the environment? Well, the first thing is that we need to look at what's working in our environment and what isn't. I started applying the OODA Loop concepts on the fireground, which is both a very dynamic environment, but it is also a very high tempo environment with immediate feedback mechanisms. I've always said the easiest thing on the fireground is to analyze in any given moment, am I winning or losing? That's the question we have to answer on the fireground. because the situation is changing rapidly. If the situation is changing negatively from my perspective, then I am losing. If I am making an impact on the environment and I'm shaping the environment, I'm winning. The challenge in day-to-day life is that the time scale that we operate on changes. The tempo changes. So we need to take a little more detached viewpoint. We need to slow our thinking down. We need to dial back that narrativizing that we do and allow ourselves to detach and really consider the environment that we're in, right? So we focus on what's working and we turn into it, and we get rid of the things that aren't working, either because the environment has changed or our circumstances have changed. What does that mean for me in version 2.0 of 2020? Well, the first thing is, park's closed, kids. I am shutting down the NoFIlterFitness gym space. The reality is that the current physical environment that we're in with COVID-19 means that I am in an indefinite timeline which I will be closed. I don't know when we're going to reopen. And businesses have high overhead costs. Rent, utilities, things like that that I need to be paying for and maintaining. That is money going out with less money coming in. Further, I think it's inevitable that we're going to see a very large economic contraction, even as we emerge from the shelter-in-place orders and the shutdowns that are occurring in our society. That economic retraction is going to have an impact on people's ability to economically invest in things like boutique gym services. I could get upset about that. I could get frustrated about that. And the reality is, I have. That's okay. It's okay to be upset about the changing dynamic. But what's important is that you have to recognize, what can I control in my environment and what can I not control in my environment, right? This goes back to Epictetus. This goes back to Marcus Aurelius. This goes back to the Stoics, right? It is not the thing itself. It's the view we take of it which disturbs us. I need to learn how to parse out and separate myself from those things that I can't control. I can't control COVID-19, whether it's in my house or in my business. What I can control is how I am managing my life, my business, my practice to not be overly destabilized by that. So, what's that mean for me? I'm ditching the stuff that's causing me to fall behind the power curve, and I'm focusing on the things that work well. This is the exact same thing that we do with an athlete who is performing in the gym, right? It may seem strange to see an Olympic weightlifter working with a piece of PVC, but when I'm coaching athletes, we take them to the point where they are beginning to show breakdowns in what's working, and we take a step back. We take a step back to the previous point of success, and then we begin moving forward again, right? 2 steps forward, 1 step back is still forward progress. It may not be fast. It can be disheartening. That's okay. What's important is to remember that there is a way forward, even when the environment is destabilizing and causing problems. So, what does version 2.0 of 2020 look like for Chris? Okay, first off, we are going to continue doing these YouTube live streams. I'm enjoying them. It's a really fun way of putting together content and delivering a message in a pretty quick time period. They're going to stay in this 15 to 30 minute range depending on the topic, right? So next week, we're going to tackle what I'm calling the universal human motive. And that's going to be something that is near and dear to my heart in how we begin thinking about the OODA Loop concepts, how we begin thinking about orientation, how we begin applying them, right? Ultimately, what's the universal human motive? It's that we all seek to thrive as agents in the world. And if that is an accurate statement, so what? What do we do with it? That's what I want to talk about a little bit next week, okay? So other things that are going to be happening for me going forward. Again, ditching the stuff that is causing me to fall behind the power curve, increasing the things that are working for me. So, going to be closing down the commercial space, rebuilding a at-home location to do content production and do personal training. So those are things that I will be continuing to do. I'm rolling out a new website sometime in the next month or two. I've got the domain name now, chrisfsw.com, and I'm going to be focusing on sort of how I do these things. That's going to be a website where I take a lot of what I've done with the Adult Academy website and the NoFIlterFitness website and narrow those focuses down to one particular audience, focusing on personal development, leadership, mentorship, parenting, all of those things from my philosophical perspective, from my ethos. Be maintaining the fireservicewarrior.com website as we have as both an archive site and a place for me to continue to put out information, particularly for the fire service audience. So fireservicewarrior.com is going to stay. chrisfsw.com is going to launch. NoFIlterFitness as a website is going to very likely point itself in the direction of chrisfsw.com. The Adult Academy website is going to become a business website. Adult Academy LLC is the physical business structure that I use to do all of these things. It's how we pay the bills, it's how we do the publishing, all of those things, and Adult Academy LLC will remain as the principal business agent entity for all of this stuff. So what does that mean for you? Absolutely nothing! But anyway, I like to be transparent about how I'm doing things. So that's sort of how those things are going to begin evolving over the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks as I start building out and reorganizing those structures. The other thing that we're going to be doing, got a dumpster getting delivered tomorrow, I'm going to start building out that production space. Much of what I do is the content production. I'm going to be focusing on both the content production that you're seeing with the live streams. I'm going to be focusing on rolling out new fitness content, very much getting down to a brass tacks instructional basis for fitness. I've been writing and developing a beginning pull-up program, and as soon as we get the new space built out, I'm going to begin shooting videos to go along with that, and that program is going to get released into the wild. The other project that I have working is an intro to fitness program for folks who are looking to do at-home training, go from being in a very sedentary lifestyle to getting back off the couch. Both of these programs are rooted in the other thing that I think I do well, which is work hands-on with people. I've learned a lot about coaching over the last 10 years, learned a lot about training over the last 20, and I want to bring those skill sets in behavioral learning, cognitive learning, and merging that skill set to an audience that's much wider, right? Again, I could choose to be very frustrated and upset, and I've been disappointed, but I could choose to be really destabilized by this economic turn that is causing me to have to make the decision to, or at least influencing, if not causing me, influencing me to make the decision to close the NoFIlterFitness physical space, the commercial space. I could be really upset about that. I could be really destabilized by that. That could put me behind significantly. Rather than focus on what is not working and being mired in that, I'm choosing to see the things that are working and push forward with those while shedding the stuff that's not. That's how I'm doing it. So that's how things are going to continue to evolve here. With that in mind, I am asking for your support. I am asking for the help of the folks who find this information and this content valuable. It costs money to do stuff. Plain and simple. None of this is paying my bills. I am funding a lot of it out of pocket. I'm fine with that. I enjoy the work and I think it's useful and helpful. But ongoing support does help. Purchasing the books through Amazon, purchasing the books through Fire Engineering for the combat position book. The big thing that provides the most direct assistance to producing this content right now is supporting me through Patreon. I've changed the Patreon page to be patreon.com/ChrisFSW. The focus is going to be on producing content both exclusively for Patreon and for others, for the Fire Service Warrior community, for the general audience through that Patreon page. And what I'm doing there is there are 4 different support levels. If you go to the page, you can see those. And there's exclusive content that's getting pumped out just for patrons. There is some of that content that you're getting early access to, and then it's going to be trickled out to a wider audience. There's a couple of different levels you can support. Check it out if you have the opportunity to support it. I really appreciate it. So that's what my version 2.0 looks like. Seize the things that are working well, build upon them, shed the things that are pulling me back, that are bleeding energy, and ditch them, get rid of them, alter, adjust. Does that mean that I'm never going to have a commercial space ever again? Absolutely not. My decisions today are focused on the environment today. Much like on the fire ground, we may go from an interior attack to an exterior attack, transitional back interior. We have to base it on what's happening in the environment. That is what we do. Yeah, it's pretty much that simple. To Brock's point in the live stream comments, we take what's working, we destroy the stuff that's not, we create new. Analysis and synthesis, right? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis in the Hegelian language that I like. All of these things are going to be happening. So that's what it's going to look like. New live stream next Monday, 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time, April 6th. Enjoy your week. New content coming. With that said, I would especially like to thank all of the patrons that have supported me so far in this journey. Kevin Richson, Travis, Adam Mares, Chase Morgan, Eddie Crombie, James Klatsky, Justin Ide, Ryan Trader, Brandon Douglas, Brock Clapp, David Hinosa, Eric Chisholm, Timothy Bullard, Zach Riddle, Andrew Murtaugh, Brent Weigand, Chris Bondus, Chuck Hammond, Craig Wall, Elliot Harris, Keel Samsing, Mark Bates, Matthew Spangler, and Stephen. Thank you for your support in this ongoing effort to build new stuff. Absolutely going to be a ton of new content coming, both for patrons and for the general public. 2020 version 2.0. See you soon. Cheers.